The school courtyard buzzed with the usual noise of lunchtime students laughing, trading snacks, crowding around their friend groups. But in one corner, far from the cheerful noise, a different scene was unfolding. A frail, quiet boy named Ian stood pressed against a brick wall, clutching his backpack as if it were a shield. 3 older boys surrounded him like predators closing in on their prey. "Come on. Say something. Why are you always so weird?" One of the bullies sneered, flicking the brim of Ian's cap. Another grabbed his backpack and tossed it onto the ground, spilling his books everywhere. The third laughed loudly, attracting a few onlookers who watched but didn't dare interfere. Ian's voice shook as he whispered, "Please. Just stop." But his plea only fueled their cruelty. They shoved him again, harder this time, and his glasses slid down his nose. In the distance, sitting on a bench with 2 friends, Hamza noticed the commotion not because it was loud, but because the silence from Ian was too painful to ignore. Hamza, a confident but kind 5-year-old, had always believed that strength meant standing up for what was right. His father used to tell him, "Being brave isn't about fighting. It's about protecting someone who can't protect themselves." Hamza stood up. His friends looked at him in surprise. "Bro, don't get involved. Those kids are trouble." But Hamza didn't hesitate. "Someone has to," he said simply before walking toward the bullies. As he approached, he saw Ian's trembling hands trying to gather his scattered books. One of the bullies kicked a notebook farther away, laughing as Ian crawled after it. That was the last straw. "Hey! Hamza shouted. His voice cut through the courtyard noise like a sharp blade. The bullies turned. The leader narrowed his eyes. "What do you want, Hamza?" Hamza walked right up to them, positioning himself between Ian and the bullies. "Leave him alone. Now." A tense silence spread. Students nearby stopped eating and began watching, sensing something important was happening. The leader smirked. "Why? He's nobody." Hamza's jaw tightened. "Everyone is somebody. And nobody deserves this." One of the bullies stepped closer, trying to intimidate him. "You think you can tell us what to do?" "I don't have to tell you," Hamza replied calmly. "You already know what you're doing is wrong." For a moment, it looked like a fight would break out. The bullies exchanged glances, calculating whether it was worth it. Hamza didn't move, his eyes were steady, strong, fearless. Finally, with a frustrated scoff, the leader shrugged. "Whatever. Let's go. Not worth the trouble." They walked off, shoving each other and muttering insults under their breath. The crowd slowly dispersed, but the atmosphere had changed. People whispered, impressed that someone had dared to step in. Hamza knelt beside Ian. "Hey, are you okay?" Ian nodded shakily. "Yes. Thank you." Hamza helped him gather his books, carefully brushing dust off one of the torn pages. "You shouldn't be alone during break," Hamza said gently. "If anyone bothers you again, you tell me, okay?" Ian looked at him with eyes filled with surprise and something deeper. Trust. Gratitude. Relief. "Why did you help me?" he asked quietly. Hamza smiled. "Because it was the right thing to do." Ian swallowed, nodding slowly. No one had ever stood up for him before, not once in all the years he'd been bullied. But today, someone had stepped out of their comfort zone for him. Someone had shown him that kindness wasn't just a word, it was an action, a choice, a responsibility. Hamza walked him to class, and though their conversation was minimal, the silence between them was warm, safe. Ian felt lighter, as if a huge weight had been lifted off his chest. For Hamza, it was just a simple act of courage. For Ian, it was life-changing. What neither of them knew was that this single moment, this act of standing up against cruelty, would echo far into the future. A day would come when the roles reversed, and the weak boy Hamza once protected would become the person holding his life in his hands. But for now, it was just a moment of kindness. A seed planted quietly, destined to grow into something far greater than either boy could ever imagine. Years passed, silently and steadily, the way time often moves when no one is paying attention. The school where the incident happened grew older, its walls collecting dust and memories that no student would ever fully understand. Life, however, had taken Hamza and Ian in completely different directions. Hamza had grown into a determined and hardworking young man. After graduating from college, he stepped into the corporate world with ambition in his eyes and a heart that still valued fairness, perhaps shaped long ago by the bullying he once stood against. He worked as a sales manager, the kind of man who always greeted his team with respect, no matter their position. People said he had a natural sense of leadership. Not the kind that demanded authority, but the kind that inspired others to follow him willingly. Yet beneath his confident exterior, there was something else, something he didn't talk about. Part of him still remembered that day from his teenage years. The day he had stepped in for a boy everyone else ignored. He didn't do it to be a hero, he did it because it was the right thing to do. But he never knew what happened to that boy afterward. Life had swept them apart, as it often does. On the other side of the city lived Ian, no longer the timid, fragile boy who used to shrink at the sight of trouble. Growing up, he carried the memory of that moment when someone he barely knew stood up for him while the world remained silent. It became a turning point. A spark that quietly burned inside his heart. He promised himself that if he ever had the chance, he would help others the way Hamza helped him. Ian didn't become a loud or bold man. His voice remained soft, his presence calm. But inside, he had developed a strength that came not from muscles or fearlessness, but from understanding pain that taught him empathy. He chose to become a paramedic, a profession that matched the quiet heroism he admired. Every day he saw accidents, emergencies, fear, and heartbreak. But he also saw hope. A single helping hand, a quick decision, a comforting voice, these small actions sometimes meant the difference between life and death. Ian took his job seriously. He trained harder than most, volunteered for emergency shifts, and learned to stay firm even in the middle of chaos. He didn't seek praise. He didn't post his efforts online. His purpose came from something deeper, a lifelong gratitude toward the boy who once shielded him from cruelty. Though Hamza and Ian lived in the same city, their lives never crossed. Sometimes destiny waits for the perfect moment to connect two stories. Meanwhile, Hamza found himself gradually consumed by the pressure of adulthood. Targets, deadlines, bills, responsibilities, everything weighed on him like invisible chains. But he always stayed grounded. His colleagues often said, "Hamza treats everyone like they matter," and, somehow, that became his reputation. He saw himself in every new intern who felt lost. Every junior who feared making mistakes, every teammate who didn't speak up. Perhaps, subconsciously, he remembered Ian, someone who had needed help but received it only from him. In his free time, Hamza enjoyed long drives. The hum of the engine, the open road, the flickering streetlights, it all gave him a sense of peace he couldn't find anywhere else. He never imagined that one of these drives would lead him straight into the hands of fate. Ian, meanwhile, had begun to feel the weight of the job. Saving lives was noble, yes, but it was also emotionally exhausting. He had witnessed things that kept him awake at night. Yet he continued, because every time he felt like giving up, he remembered a teenage boy standing defiantly between him and danger, asking the bullies, "Have you no shame?" That memory kept him strong. Both men were living separate lives, unaware that destiny was arranging a silent reunion, one that would test courage, loyalty, and the deep, invisible power of kindness. For now, they were just two men walking their own paths. One, spreading strength through leadership. The other spreading compassion through service. Neither knew that the past they shared was about to return in the most unexpected way. And when it did, the act of kindness given long ago would not just be remembered, it would save a life. The night was darker than usual, one of those nights when the sky looked heavy, the clouds swollen with anger, and the wind whispered warnings most people ignored. Hamza, exhausted from a long day of work, drove down the nearly empty highway. Rain hammered the windshield, blurring his vision even with the wipers moving at full speed. He should have pulled over. But he was only a few minutes from home. Just a little more, he told himself. A sudden flash of lightning cracked across the sky, startling him. At that same moment, a dog sprinted across the road. Hamza swerved instinctively. The tires screeched. The car spun out of control. There was a violent crash, the sound of metal twisting, glass shattering, and the world going dark. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. Time meant nothing in the twisted wreckage. A passerby finally noticed the faint glow of headlights pointing upward from a ditch, and immediately called emergency services. Within minutes, the wail of an ambulance echoed through the storm. Inside that ambulance was Ian, now a trained paramedic known for his patience and calm during crises. He had no idea that tonight would take him back to a moment buried deep in childhood. A moment that shaped who he became. Severe crash, male driver, unconscious. The dispatcher announced through the radio. Ian nodded, preparing the necessary equipment as they neared the scene. When the ambulance reached the crash site, the rain was relentless. The paramedics slid down the muddy slope, their boots sinking with every step. The car was mangled, its front end crushed. The windshield shattered into dagger-like shards. Ian's flashlight cut through the darkness as he approached the driver's side. "Sir, can you hear me?" He called out, but there was no response. He leaned closer, squinting through broken glass, and his breath caught. He froze, eyes widening. The face bruised, bloodied, and barely conscious was unmistakable. It was Hamza, the boy who once stood in front of him, shielding him from cruelty. The only person who had ever stepped up for him when he was too afraid to stand up for himself. For a moment, Ian felt the world stop. Memories flooded back, a schoolyard, bullies laughing, him cowering, and Hamza grabbing his arm and pulling him behind him like a shield. "Leave him alone," teenage Hamza had said, trembling but determined. "If you want to pick on someone, pick on me." That day, Hamza had walked him home. That day, Ian learned what courage looked like. Tonight, fate had brought them back together, but the roles were reversed. "Ian, we need to move fast," his partner shouted, snapping him out of his thoughts. Right. Let's get him out." Adrenaline surged through him. He worked with an intensity he had never felt before. Every action carried purpose. Every decision held weight. They carefully cut the seatbelt, stabilized Hamza's neck, and extracted him from the wreckage with practiced precision. Ian cradled Hamza's head as they carried him up the slope, shielding him from the pounding rain with his own body. "His blood pressure is dropping," the other paramedic warned. Once inside the ambulance, Ian worked swiftly, oxygen mask secured, IV inserted, vitals monitored. His hands moved fast but steady, guided by desperation and gratitude. He whispered under his breath, "Stay with me. Please stay with me." Hamza groaned faintly, his eyelids fluttering. "That's it, come on," Ian urged, leaning closer. "You're not leaving tonight. Not after everything you did for me." The ambulance sped toward the hospital, sirens slicing through the rain-soaked night. Inside, Ian monitored every heartbeat, every breath. He refused to look away, afraid that even a moment of neglect could change the outcome. When they reached the emergency entrance, doctors rushed in. Ian gave detailed reports, refusing to miss a single detail. Even as Hamza was taken into surgery, Ian stood outside the doors. Soaked, shivering, but refusing to move. Hours earlier, he had started his shift like any other. Tonight, he fought for the life of the man who once fought for him. And he would not leave until he knew Hamza was safe. The hospital corridor was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of machines and the distant footsteps of nurses making their evening rounds. Ian stood outside Hamza's room, still wearing his paramedic jacket, drenched from rain and sweat. He had been running on pure adrenaline since the moment he recognized the face of the man trapped inside the wrecked car, the same boy who had once stood up for him when no one else dared. Ian glanced through the window. Hamza lay unconscious, bruised, stitched, hooked to IV lines, and breathing with the help of an oxygen mask. The doctors said he had survived the worst, but the next few hours were critical. Ian could have gone home hours ago. But he didn't. Something deep in his heart anchored him here. This wasn't just another patient. This was the man who had changed the course of his life. As rain tapped softly against the glass, Ian found himself drifting back to that day in school so many years ago, the day when he had been shoved, mocked, and humiliated while the whole playground watched in silence. Everyone had looked away. Everyone except Hamza. Ian remembered the exact moment the older boy stepped in front of him and yelled at the bullies to back off. He had stood tall, fearless, and unwavering. And to a scared, lonely boy like Ian, that courage had felt like a miracle. A soft knock behind him broke his thoughts. "You're still here?" a nurse asked gently. "Your shift ended hours ago." "I know," Ian replied, looking at the sleeping figure inside the room. "But I need to be here. For him." She nodded respectfully. "You saved his life. That's more than most people get to say." Ian smiled faintly, though his heart was still heavy with worry. He saved mine first. Minutes slipped into hours. The room was dim, lit only by the warm glow of a bedside lamp. Ayan finally stepped inside and sat in the chair beside Hamza. He took a deep breath, studying the face he hadn't seen in years. Time had changed, Hamza's stronger jawline, a few faint wrinkles, a little gray at the edges of his hair, yet the kindness in his expression was still there, even in unconsciousness. You probably don't remember me, Ayan whispered softly. But I remember you. The world remembers the people who show courage when no one else will. As if in response, Hamza stirred slightly. His fingers twitched. His breathing shifted. Ayan stood up immediately as the heart monitor beeped a little faster. Slowly, painfully, Hamza's eyes opened. He blinked several times, adjusting to the light. His gaze wandered around the room before landing on the figure standing beside him. You. Hamza croaked, his voice hoarse. Are you the paramedic? Ayan nodded, relief flooding his chest. Yes. You're safe now. You're 9. In the hospital. We got you here just in time. Hamza swallowed, still weak. Thank you. You saved my life. Ayan hesitated for a moment. Then he took a small step forward. Actually, you saved mine first. Hamza frowned slightly, confused. Ayan leaned in and said gently, Ayan. From school. The boy you defended from bullies. Recognition hit Hamza like a spark. His eyes widened. Ayan. That was you? After all these years? Ayan nodded, smiling softly. I never forgot what you did for me. Your kindness. It shaped who I became. It taught me that one brave act can change an entire life. Hamza's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. Despite the pain, he reached out his hand. Ayan took it, and for a moment, the hospital room faded away, leaving only two human beings, connected by a circle of kindness neither could have predicted. You didn't owe me anything, Hamza whispered. I owed you everything. Ayan replied gently. And tonight, I finally got the chance to return it. The door opened and the doctor stepped in, smiling at the sight of Hamza awake. But even as medical procedures resumed, both men knew something deeper had happened, a lesson sealed by life itself. As Ayan finally stepped out of the room, exhausted yet peaceful, the narrator's voice settles in. Kindness is never wasted. One small act today may come back to you years later, when you need it the most.